Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Family Sedan channel. Attorney Jeremy Hogan brought up two very interesting topics. I'm going to share both of them with you in this latest Moon Family Sedan room temperature jam. The first one he brought up on Twitter just a couple days ago, and he articulated his reasons for why, the number one reason, why XRP is not a security. And he went into quite a bit of detail. And, as a result of that, and I understand why, there were a lot of people that read that and are just thinking, of course, because we all understand. We're paying attention. We understand XRP itself, of course, isn't a security. So why isn't this damn thing just over? Shouldn't Judge Torres have just wrapped this thing up? Shouldn't it be all sewn up by now? And some people are thinking it looks that open and shut. So in response to that, just a few, I guess probably several hours or so ago, so tonight, Attorney Jeremy Hogan had additional thoughts on that, explaining why it's actually a lot more nuanced and complex, and nothing is actually a slam dunk when it comes to this, even though I think it's pretty clear to us, for good reason, that we're on the right side of law, the right side of history as a result. Attorney Jeremy Hogan explained why it's a bit more complex than maybe some people initially were given it credit upon reading his first thread a couple days ago on why XRP clearly the number one reason it's not a security. And a lot of this actually does come down to decentralization, which I've been saying from the beginning, and it's true because that plays into the factor of whether or not there is a common enterprise, which is a prong of the Howey test. But before going further, I do want to be clear, I do not have a legal or financial background of any kind. I am not offering legal or financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. All right, so let's hop into this first thread. Again, this first one was from a couple days ago. The second part, he just published like several hours or so ago. But this first one is where he's explaining why XRP is not a security. So here's what he wrote. The number one reason why XRP is not a security, a thread. First, under the legislative definition of a security, XRP can only possibly fit under the definition of an investment contract. It is not a stock or bond, etc. Even the SEC concedes this investment contract. And then he shared this screen grab, which makes the points, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, it's on your screen. I've actually read this thing in its entirety at least twice on my channel. And it's just citing all the things that could fall under the category. And so then Attorney Hogan says, an investment contract analysis is governed by the Howey case and progeny. The test in the case, investment in a common enterprise with expectation of profits from efforts of others, was in response to a lower court opinion that a speculative investment was required. The Howey case did not focus on the contract part of investment contract, but took it as a given that a contract was necessary as it was responding to the lower court and, indeed, had just addressed the contract part of the test just before rendering the Howey opinion. So, folks, think about this. Ripple, we now know that the backbone of their argument, Ripple's legal argument, is that there is no contract, so there can't be an investment contract. Now, the SEC can come in and say, hey, when you look at Howey, contract this, contract that. But that's because it was assumed based on what the lower court had just covered. So it wasn't necessary to regurgitate all that back up when they were come to the decision for Howey, ultimately. That's the point. And then Attorney Hogan said in the I just want to make sure I didn't lose my spot. In the Joyner case, the court had just discussed the existence of a contract and had decided that there was an enforceable implied agreement or perhaps an explicit legal agreement, but either way, there was a contract between the offerer and purchaser and an investment contract. In the Ripple case, the SEC has failed to argue that there was an implied or explicit contract of investment. Instead, it argues that the purchase agreement is all that is required, and that is all it proves. But the argument tears the investment from the contract. As a simple purchase, without more, cannot be an investment contract. It is just an investment, like buying an ounce of gold, as there is no obligation for Ripple to do anything except transfer the asset. As is often the case, because this is so obvious, there is not a lot of case authority directly on point, And folks, by the way, that's ultimately part of the reason why we're in the predicament that we're in. As stated by Attorney Hogan here, it's so obvious. Why would there be a bunch of case law around it? There's not. As a result, that specific part of it anyway. But there's plenty that's good that would ultimately help XRP holders who are wishing for a positive outcome here. And here's what Attorney Hogan said. But all of the blue sky cases, which the Howey case explicitly states, dictate the definition of investment contract. All of them had a contract regarding the investment. So folks, there was a contract with all of these, regardless of the way in which it was written out. There was, period. And then Attorney Hogan says, indeed, how can a person reasonably rely on an offerer to make them a profit when they had zero legal recourse when that offerer fails to come through? They cannot. Even the oft-quoted four-part test implies that a contract of some sort is required. If the result seems harsh, keep in mind that the designation security is not meant to protect a would-be investor from making bad decisions. The securities laws are only to require that offerers make certain disclosures regarding the contract that purchaser is entering. So folks, there you go. And that's another key piece. Think about that. It's not the SEC's job here to prevent us from making bad investment decisions. It's about disclosures. But although, of course, in reality, we do understand that the SEC has no actual desire to protect investors. They do not give a damn. They've made that more than clear. And then Attorney Hogan says, the issue is not whether Ripple used money from the sale of XRP to fund its business. The issue is whether the SEC has proven that there was either an implied or explicit contract between Ripple and XRP purchasers relating to their investment. There was no such contract. If you happen to be Judge Torres's law clerk, I hope this helps as you begin drafting the decision. Call me if you need anything else. Smiley face. Okay, so that's a funny way to end the thread. Although I will say also, I sure as hell hope that they're not just now starting to draft this damn thing. Hopefully, there's been a draft in the works for months at this point. I would hope anyway. But I can understand it could take a lot of time to put something like this together, and structurally, how are you going to do it and all that. So it's a big process no matter what. But my strong suspicion is it's probably about finished at this point. That'd just be a for fun guess. I don't have any sort of insight now. But so anyway, going through that thread, I can understand why you can read through that and think, that sounds pretty slam dunk. So what gives then? Why shouldn't we just be endlessly rejoicing? Well, it's not that we can't be happy about, the potential outcome here, because I think there is reason to be excited that we're going to get a positive decision from Judge Torres, but it's not quite so slam dunk on this topic as I think we'd like it to be. And there's an opportunity for the judge to get this wrong. And, in reading through this next part of Jeremy Hogan breaking this down, this is the part that he typed up just several hours or so ago, just today. So it's just interesting that in part it comes down to, if the judge understands crypto and the nature of crypto and what it means to be decentralized, then we have great odds that this is going to go in the favor of XRP holders and against the SEC. If the judge doesn't sufficiently understand cryptocurrency and distributed ledger technology, and just truly what decentralization means and why it's important, then we might be screwed, frankly. So here's the latest from Attorney Hogan just several hours or so ago. And this is his add-on to what I just shared with you. He said, "The big battle between the SEC and crypto, a thread. A lot of comments, re the below thread, suggested it's a no-brainer and asked, why is it taking the judge so long? Not true. This is a nuanced legal battle on which the future of crypto as we know it may hinge. In response to Ripple's argument that there must be a contract to have an investment contract, the SEC cited a number of cases in which, to one degree or another, there was no formal written agreement. The argument here is that Howey covers almost any investment purchase. What the SEC is really arguing is that prongs 2, 3, and 4, when taken together, supplant the need for the elements of a legal contract. In other words, Howey doesn't require a formal contract because the common enterprise and expectation of profits is the contract analysis. Now, folks, I don't pretend to be a lawyer, but just using basic logic, just as somebody not coming from a legal background, just an everyday Joe Schmo here. Upon seeing that that's effectively what the SEC is arguing, there's no contract, so we're just going to assert that prongs 2, 3, and 4 of the Howey test, that is the contract. That does not pass the smell test for common sense, does it? Is that not just me? How the hell does it? Well, we can't find a contract, so we'll just assert that this is. There you go. There's the contract, Judge. You gonna believe us? You gonna fall for it? But see, this it just makes me think of like how the SEC's been handling this case from the beginning. They'll just throw whatever at the wall and just see what sticks. That's pretty much it. And they're hoping that either the judge will be stupid or uninformed or make a mistake, and then the SEC will get their way on various aspects of this case. But it just seems to me like a completely disingenuous argument. No contract, so the prongs, that constitutes a contract. It's literally not a contract. That's why it grinds my gears. Attorney Hogan continues, though. Unfortunately for Ripple, the SEC had early success in crypto cases on this issue in cases which the crypto companies did not raise the post-loss obligation issue. Now, luckily for Ripple, Judge Torres hasn't put too much weight so far on what her colleagues have done. Looking at the SEC's counter-arguments and cases, you can see why lawyers think that Ripple raised this issue with an eye towards obtaining an appellate ruling. I disagree. There is enough in the Ripple briefs for the trial judge to rule in its favor. It rests on one thing: decentralization. And by the way, I'll just pause to note one thing here, and it's totally fair. I try to not disagree with the lawyers in our community that much because they're the ones that actually know what the hell they're talking about when it comes to the legal stuff here. But when he was specifically writing here, that there is enough for the judge to rule in favor of Ripple, that makes all the sense in the world. I do recall additionally, just one thing I wanted to add is that I remember Attorney Deaton stating specifically that setting aside that perspective from Attorney Hogan there, Attorney Deaton still stated that when you're talking about a higher level court, I'd seen him articulate the position, and I'm going to have to paraphrase here, but he effectively articulated the position that if it goes to an appellate court, or especially the Supreme Court, that these arguments are likely to stick. He thinks more likely to stick in that scenario. And perhaps the reason he said that, I don't know, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I kind of wonder, especially if you're talking about the Supreme Court level, well, you can look up the makeup of the Supreme Court and then come to some assumptions about what they might be thinking about all these various topics, whereas when it comes to the district court level here with Judge Torres, it's just one person. So if the one person gets this wrong, we are all screwed, at least in the short term, right? So again, though, he says this all rests on one thing, and Jeremy Hogan says what that one thing is: decentralization. And then he wrote, the reason why the other cases lost is because, looking at the purchase of the crypto from a traditional standpoint, it smells like the strange type of investment/purchase that Howey is supposed to capture. But it's not. Because in a traditional purchase, it would make no sense for someone to buy an asset without having some legal recourse if the seller screwed you over. But a traditional purchase is made from a centralized entity. Historically, sales of securities are from centralized sellers. The difference in crypto is that it does make sense to purchase crypto because it is decentralized. No one owns the network. And so it makes sense that someone might purchase XRP as an investment as an investment rather, just as an investment, without having a contract with anyone. This is the key differentiator. And this is why I believe that if the judge or her wonderful law clerk understands the technology, Ripple will win on this issue. If the judge doesn't grasp what crypto is, well, then we might be looking at an appeal of this issue. But this is the line in the sand. This is the issue that saves crypto in the United States, because a Ripple win on a Howey analysis is a big setback for the SEC. but not a dagger in the heart. But it's not a no-brainer. The Howey test isn't outdated, it just needs an upgrade. Hopefully, our mechanic is up to the task. And that's the end of the thread. Now, that last part, that was a pretty cool way to end the thread. And I will tell you, and if you guys have been, any of you out there that have been listening to me for a long time, especially if you've been listening to me the whole time I'm covering the SCCB Ripple case for over 2 years at this point, I have many times over the last couple years stated that I'm not convinced that we need to throw out Howey entirely. I said it seems to me that most of the law that would need to be in place for this to work with crypto is already in place. A major part that is not in place has specifically to do with decentralization. And so Attorney Hogan articulated what he meant by that. What I had meant by that isn't really that far off from this, because what I typically said, it's been a while since I've stated this, but it's that the reason that there's not sufficient clarity and that this actually could be an easy fix if the SEC wanted there to be an easy fix for this is that if you cite what decentralization is, and there are guidelines for that, well, that plays heavily into whether or not there is a common enterprise, which is a prong of the Howey test. So if a network is actually decentralized, and we'd have to figure out we'd have to agree on what that means, but if there's no central point of failure, which would be a gigantic part of it, well, then you're already like over 90% of the way there, probably, or at least 90% of the way. Because if it's decentralized, there can't be a common enterprise, which means whatever it is that you're talking about doesn't pass the Howey test. It's not a security in that case. So it's not that none of this works. It's just that it's not suited for crypto without adding additional clarity. That's the problem. And so you can see why Attorney Hogan worded it the way that he worded it. But I think it plays pretty well into what I've been talking about literally for years here. So if the judge understands this and what decentralization is, then it should be a win for Ripple. But there is nuance here, and there's a lot of room for error. And I think that's one of the broader points that Attorney Hogan was making here. So still lots of great opportunity, but that's what we're looking at. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the Moon Family Sedan.